My name is John Mogul. I'm an Associate Director here at the Wolfsonian. And thank you all very much for coming out this afternoon. I know it's a little chilly outside, so hopefully you're warming up. Our collection here is global, but sometimes we like to turn our attention to our own backyard, whether it's the city of Miami Beach, the South Florida region, or the state of Florida as a whole. The last talk this afternoon will explore the way that Florida was promoted as a destination for both pleasure and profit in the first half of the 20th century, with a focus on the role of maps in these promotional efforts. It connects closely with our current 6th floor exhibition, and if you haven't already had a chance to get up there to see it, you will have a little bit of time after the talk this afternoon, and I highly recommend it. That exhibition is called Plotting Power, Maps and the Modern World. And we're very lucky this afternoon to have my colleague and the curator of that exhibition, the Wolfsonian's own Lea Nickless, to speak to us. Lea is a Wolfsonian veteran, having spent 3 decades working on collection development, management, and research, as well as quite a few curatorial and publication projects. She is, for instance, the curator or co-curator of exhibitions that include A Universe of Things, Mickey Wolfson Collects, and Aerial Vision. And as I said, she curated our current exhibition, Plotting Power, and is the author of a beautiful book, hot off the presses, by that same name, which is available for purchase in our cafe. And I'm going to wave the book around so you'll see. So congratulations on the book, Lea, and thanks very much for speaking with us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here with us. It's so great to see you here in person. Maps. Maps are potent graphic symbols. They provide data and inspire trust, even though they are in fact subjective interpretations of space and are shaped by the maker's intentions. In today's talk, I will give some examples of how maps and geographic imagery of all kinds were widely used by agents of power. And when I say agents of power, I'm mostly talking about, for this talk, the real estate and development industry of the Florida boom time. So this will be really looking at some of the machinations of selling the Sunshine State in that, starting the late 19th century and then going into the 20th century, of course. So as a way of introduction, as I do upstairs in the exhibition, I like to sort of talk about the 3 kinds of geographic imagery that we're seeing. And the first is the globe, the form of a globe. And on the left, you see the globe, which was the centerpiece of the Pan American terminal at Dinner Key that was in place started in 1934. It was installed. And it was just this really dynamic piece that was there and really inspirational to all who would go through that space. When the Pan American terminal ceased to exist as such, the globe, of course, went to the Science Museum, which probably most of us who are Miamians saw it in that location. And it has recently been reinstalled. I have not seen it, just north of downtown at the Miami World Center. You've seen it? Yeah. Okay, cool, cool. And the image on the right is this really kind of interesting global projection, and it's showing Florida, smack dab in the middle of all things. And this is from a child's atlas from 1964. So the second kind of geographic imagery is the more straightforward map. And this map is from a brochure that was published around 1922. And it's showing, again, we have this idea of these concentric circles emanating from the center of Miami. You know, Miami is the center of all. It's interesting to look at maps too during this period because they were so rapidly changing, because the actual shape and topography of Miami was changing with each year and certainly with each decade. So in this particular map, you see the Collins Bridges here. So this is the Venetian Causeway, but the Venetian Islands have yet to be created. Also hibiscus and what's the one next to hibiscus? Thank you, is still not showing here. So it's just kind of fascinating when you really start, you can spend days looking at maps and just sort of analyzing what's happening and interpreting the history of the moment. And the third kind of geographic imagery is something that is sometimes referred to as a logo map, wherein the shape of the location becomes almost a kind of branding mechanism or a logo. The image on the left is from it's a cover of a book that in fact was published in 1926, just at a moment when the Florida land boom was starting to take its dip southward. And this was the author's, Mr. Stockbridge was actually in the real estate business, and he partnered with a journalist to write this book, which they produced super fast to try and, you know, bolster what was starting to be definitely a flagging sales momentum that had been going on for several years at that moment. The image on the right is a logo map of the state of Florida created out of citrus fruit. And this was at Cypress Gardens as a promotional. And it's also interesting to look at the ladies at the perimeter, the upper edge. We see on the northern edge of Florida, they are all Southern belles, hoop-skirted Southern belles. And then along the coast, we have the bathing beauties. And here down all the way in Key West, we see what is a Cuban young woman. So as my first, so these agents of power who really took hold, the first one that I want to really delve into is Henry Flagler and the Florida East Coast Railway, FEC. Flagler, of course, was an incredible visionary who almost single-handedly opened up Florida for development and tourism. He had made a tremendous fortune with Standard Oil before he turned his sights on Florida. In 1888, he built the Ponce de Leon Hotel in St. Augustine, first in a series of luxury resorts. And then he realized, oh, we need something to get people from one of these resorts to the other. So he started buying up railroads, and then he started building railroads. I mean, he just moved forward with an incredible rate down the state. By 1894, FEC had reached Palm Beach. There he built the Royal Poinciana Hotel, the Breakers, and also Whitehall, his winter residence. So by doing these things really almost single-handedly, he established Palm Beach as a winter resort for the wealthy. So then the FEC Railroad arrives in Miami in 1896, and the city was incorporated later that year. The citizens of Miami at the time, that was numbering at 444, wanted to name the new town Flagler, but he declined, and the existing name of Miami remained. But along with bringing the railroad down, Flagler financed and built built streets, water and power systems, and also the Royal Palm Resort Hotel, which was right there on the river, on the Miami River. But now I want to bring your attention to this advertisement, which is circa 1898. And it features this logo map of Florida with this seemingly celestial beams of light shining down on the East Coast, framed, however, by this sort of ominous, everything else is kind of dark and eerie, but no, Florida, especially the East Coast, is completely in the light. And then if you look down here at this tagline, the East Coast of Florida is paradise regained. So this is actually a play on the name of a 17th century poem by John Milton, Paradise Lost, which tells the biblical story of the Garden of Eden and the expulsion of Adam and Eve. So by using these celestial rays of light and this particular tagline, what FEC or Flagler is saying is that Florida is the Garden of Eden and is sort of divinely guided. We are divinely guided to come to this place. So this same logo or branding mechanism was used at least until about as late as 1911. I'm not sure how much later than that. These are a couple of brochures from our collection. But of course, FEC modernized with the times, and the idea of paradise regained morphed over time. And this is a 1921 version of that, where you see the well-heeled, fur-coated woman on the left, sort of transforming into this, what would have been quite racy bathing attire and becoming a Florida bathing beauty of her own. And in the same brochure on the back side is this other very modern image of two women. It's probably a man behind the wheel of this airplane, but two women arriving via airplane to Florida. And so this is 1921. This was, you know, very sort of cutting edge at that moment. And just taking us forward again a couple of decades in terms of FEC modernizing the way they were presenting their product. As in the streamliner here, even the map is streamlined. You see how the route is shown to be like just very, very clean, very easy. Everything is modern and fast. So another of these agents of power that I want to talk about is John Collins, who was a Quaker who arrived here around the turn of the century. He first started, as we know, farming what is now known as Miami Beach. But he also, I think, had an understanding of the potential for developing the land that he was farming. In 1911, he established the Miami Beach Improvement Company. And then in 1913, he built the Collins Bridge. Up until that moment, if you wanted to come to Miami Beach, you had to get on a boat. And that wasn't good for tourism or for anything, and especially for his farming business. So he built this incredible bridge, and it was, at the time, it was the longest wooden bridge in the world. He did, in fact, run short of funds at one point, and he went to another of these agents of power, Carl Fisher, who loaned him money to finish the bridge. And as part of the deal, Fisher got 200 acres of land on Miami Beach. So that was Fisher's first sort of dipping his toe into what would become he would become a major player, of course, in the development of Miami Beach. So now we have the bridge across, and now this land that was previously farmland is now sellable as lots. So this is perhaps the earliest printed map of Miami Beach, published by Collins Company, the Miami Beach Improvement Company, and it's showing all of these lots along the Atlantic. You see the avocado orchards on this side here still. So here's Lake Pancoast, and Collins Avenue is showing right here. And what's interesting when you really look at this is Collins' version of naming the streets and numbering, because he starts First Street right here, right across from Lake Pancoast, and all the way up here to 19th Street. I got a bit confused when I was first looking at this map. And it was like, where's 19th Street? No, that can't be 9th Street. But anyway, so this was Collins' version of the numbering of the situation. So that bridge opened huge development for Miami Beach. And in the 19-teens, things just, roads were built. Some development started to happen. It was a bit slow because then we have the First World War at the end of the teens. However, one of the repercussions of that war was that it in fact made Miami Beach, and Miami as well, more appealing because Europe was in such shambles. The Riviera was no longer a place that the wealthy could holiday. They couldn't go spend time there. So then we start seeing in the 1920s Miami and Miami Beach advertised as a new American, a new world Riviera. So that was the beginning of the 20s, and the beginning of the 20s was crazy. Well, the whole of the 20s were crazy for Miami, really. And this is a book that was published in 1936, which comically sort of renders how wild a time it was. Millions were being made, properties being sold multiple times. I mean, in some cases, flipping a property 8 or 10 times, I read a day, if it can imagine. People were making millions. People were, of course, later losing millions. And also millions of people came to, or thousands of salesmen and others came to Miami to get in on the action. Between 1925, there was a 400% increase in the population of Miami. So one of these early investment groups that set their sights on Miami was the Monterey Corporation, which was based out of New York City. And this is the brochure cover from 1921. And it shows this young woman rising up like Venus from this tropical metropolis. She's flanked by the palm trees, and beneath it is this tagline: "The spirit of Miami always rises above past achievements, lives in the present, and plans for the future." If only, right? We could embrace that today, too. So in this same brochure is printed this map, this painting of an aerial view of Miami with Miami Beach in the foreground. And this was a painting by Gibson Catlett, which was on view in the Fifth Avenue offices of Monterey. And I just want you to remember this painting, because this kind of painting, I will speak to it a bit later as well. But Monterey was obviously really promoting Miami in New York, and even had something called a Miami exhibition, which was the painting on view, but also an array of photographs and Florida fruits and vegetables. Around the same time, here we have, from the front page of the Miami Daily Metropolis, a map showing the building of, or the idea of the building of the Venetian islands. And you see here by now, this is 1923, so we do have Hibiscus and Palm Island here already in place. And I'm not, it always feels like we always talk about Carl Fisher as, of course, he's the father of Miami Beach, but I'm not going to really focus as much my talk on him, except here in talking about his huge contribution to the whole situation when he proposed in 1914 the building of the Dixie Highway to link the North and the South, to link Michigan to Miami. So, I mean, this was a huge undertaking, but, he had a lot of clout, obviously. 1,500-mile roadway, and it brought Americans to Florida like never before. And with each year, more and more, because, of course, automobiles became more and more commonly owned. And I just want to show, because I was trying to figure out how to present this map on the PowerPoint, and I realized if I do, you'll never be able to see it or understand what it was. But this is called a strip map. It was a free strip map of the Dixie Highway, and here you see how the map itself was this like totally stylized straight line. See, you can get straight from here to here, no problem. It's just a straight run. And this is actually from the collection of Larry Wiggins. I don't know how many of you know him, but he's a great Miami historian and former colleague here at the Wolfsonian. Well, he's still a colleague because I still ask him for help all the time. So that's from his collection. So let me just take a sip. So now this is a brochure that was actually produced by another investment company. So obviously, this one didn't really show, lots for sale or anything, but it was just trying to lure prospective buyers to Miami. And in this case, it really seems to be directed at women. So on the cover, Miami by the Sea, you see a young woman playing golf. On the other side of the map image are two women at the seaside, likely their children beside them. And the map in the center is part of this whole effort that Carl Fisher started, All Good Roads Lead to Miami, which was another tagline that we end up seeing over and over again, a slogan bringing people and used in promotional materials. So in this particular map, you see three different avenues of transportation. You see the railroad, you see the steamship, and the automobile. Up here, you see at Jacksonville is sort of this nexus of all of these highways coming in, of course, including the Dixie Highway right here. And then fast forward about 9 years to another brochure, which is again using that same slogan, all good roads lead to, in this case, greater Miami. We see a new mode of transportation. The airplane now is shown as a fourth means of arriving in Miami. And airplanes were incredibly important in Florida and in Miami for sure. It was kind of a very important means of transportation and way of getting people here because we had year-round good weather, no mountains to crash into, and beaches to land on if you had to. Other cities, of course, also used maps to promote their locations, and here we have Fort Lauderdale. Here we have Tampa. The Tampa Board of Trade published this booklet, and you see the shape of the state of Florida is created by the smoke coming up from the smoker of the cigar. Right? Yes. So, okay, back to that huge painting by Gibson Catlett that was on view in the Monterey offices in Manhattan. Here we have a photograph that I was really happy to find in the Florida State Archives, showing what the interior of a real estate office was looking like during the Florida land boom. And this office was actually located in the Halcyon Hotel, which was this gorgeous building on Flagler Street at Northeast 2nd Avenue. It was torn down, I think, 1936. But anyway, so here you see another of these large scale paintings. And in here, they are selling lots at the Everjune Gardens, which was a subdivision outside of Sarasota. As far as I've been able to ascertain, the Everjune Gardens never saw the light of day. That's in part, I believe, because this photograph is taken in March of 1926. So the real estate market was already starting to head down. And this is then 6 months before the Great Hurricane, which then definitely put an end to the whole situation of land development in Florida. But this is a Gibson Catlett painting that we have in our collection. And this actually was on view in the exhibition Aerial Vision several years ago. And this is showing the city of Sarasota. Gibson Catlett started out with studios in Chicago, and he is credited with creating this sort of genre of real estate paintings. And in some cases, well, the Miami Herald referred to them as realty-scapes, which I think is kind of a cool name for them. He had a booming business and opened studios throughout the country, hired hundreds of artists to paint these paintings, which were painted after aerial photographs. And you can see already at this point in 1925, he had an office here in Miami as well. This is another Gibson Catlett, an image of a Gibson Catlett painting that was illustrated in this brochure from circa 1925, Miami Beach is Calling You. We know that Carl Fisher had commissioned Gibson Catlett to paint one of these paintings of Miami Beach. I don't know if this is actually the same one or not. He likely did multiples of these because, again, these would have been in cities all over the country. There was one certainly here in Miami, but likely there were similar ones in Chicago and LA and other locations. And this is another one of these. This is sort of a Gibson Catlett wannabe. Louis Francis was a local Miami artist who created this huge painting that was also on view in the exhibition Aerial Vision. It's 20 feet wide. And in this particular case, it's quite funny. There was a article in the Herald where Francis says, he boasts that, you know, he's been in an airplane so many times that he can paint Miami by air with perfect accuracy. But if you look at this painting for just a few moments, you will realize how many distortions and omissions there are in it. And it's all to more fully focus on this area of South Miami that the Greater Miami Development Company was painted in 1925, and I think it was all coming a little bit too late because some of these subdivisions also never made it. So this map really shows you just the amount of optimism that was this is 1925. This was really the peak of the land boom, and there was just huge sense of what the future of Miami was going to be. You know, here we are in 1910, we had only this amount, like 1935, 1 million in population is being projected by the makers of this map. Of course, what the makers of this map didn't know was that there was going to be the Depression, that there was going to be the hurricane, that the boom was going to go bust. So in fact, that 1 million population, Miami did not reach that until 1962. So, what did happen, however, in September of 1926 was this massive hurricane, a Category 4, slamming into the city and wreaking terrible havoc. It generated a lot of negative publicity, and tourism, of course, dropped tremendously in 1927. Miami responded quickly and produced this publication almost immediately, showing like, you know, basically we're doing fine, we're okay. This is a documentation of the hurricane. But it's really interesting when you look at it how it's a bit, it's definitely a slanted response and makes light in quite a bit of ways of the hurricane. Even this map of the hurricane, it sort of looks like a wispy wind going across here rather than, you know, what really happened. And even this image here, which of course shows a lot of damage, the caption reads, "The Meyer Kaiser building, the only large downtown building seriously damaged." And that was patently untrue. It just happened that this was the only downtown building that ended up having to be razed. There were plenty of others, downtown buildings, that were seriously, seriously damaged. But it's interesting to to think about how that very hurricane inspired the building that we are in right now. So Nash Matthews was one of the two brothers who built this building as Washington Storage Company. And he happened to be coming down to Miami just after the hurricane on the train with Mr. Roney, the developer of the Roney Plaza. And Mr. Roney was talking, because he'd already heard of all the damage that had been done to his properties, and he's talking about how terrible it was and all the things that had happened. And so Nash, who was an engineer, has this idea, well, why don't I build, or we build, a fortress against the elements so that the wealthy winter residents will have a place to protect their goods. So that's what he did. In the next year, 1927, they're building Washington Storage. And it's kind of shocking even to think how they made a go of it, given everything, the timing of the situation, coming so soon with the Depression. But it seemed to flourish, actually, because in the mid-30s, so the first building in 1927 was only was only 3 stories, and then the 2 additional stories were added in 1935. So with the Great Depression, the chambers of commerce, Miami Beach, and also Coral Gables, and they went into full swing. They had to work hard to promote their destinations. And another of the slogans that was used quite a few times was this outwitting the winter, outwitting winter. And here you have this great pictographic map on the cover of this brochure showing all the fun you can have in sort of simplistic, almost cartoon-like way. And inside the same brochure, the temperatures are compared favorably with other world-famous resorts. And also, its location, again, almost central here, how Miami is this sort of nexus place where you can get here anywhere in the United States, but also Central and South America very quickly and easily. And also marketing it as Miami Beach is calling you a place of romance and fun and play. And the Miami Herald even was in on the situation, and this was this great map that they produced. And in it, the sun features dominantly in the bottom right-hand corner, with its rays almost, dissecting the whole map, but certainly getting the point across. And in this brochure that was produced by the city of Miami, it stressed an increasingly the ease of life living in Miami, stating that the city where it is June all year long. It also included information about the expanding transportation connections. Miami is 8.5 hours from New York City by air, 27 hours by railroad, and 39 hours by bus. But this new availability of air travel and how, Miami was incredibly air-minded, which was kind of a term that was used at that moment. And in this map that was produced by the Department of, by the city of Miami, it shows the distances to Miami from various locations around the country, as well as Cuba. And then it also shows the sites of all of these airports and airfields. And you see these up here would be Opa-locka, some other airports that were sort of merged with Opa-locka. There was a Northwest 54th Street, there was a flying field there. Here we have 36th Street Airport, which of course now is our Miami International Airport. There was even briefly a Coral Gables flying field. Down here, Chapman Field, which was used during the First World War. Here we have the Pan American Terminal, which you see in this postcard to the right, the seaplane terminal. And even there was a seaplane base and a short runway on the Venetian Island causeway as you entered to the islands. So Eastern Airlines, first known as Eastern Air Transport, of course, had huge impact on the city. And this is a bronze little commemorative plaque from 1930 commemorating the first passenger service flight from New York to Miami. And this is a mural study for a mural that was completed and still in situ in Rockefeller Plaza in New York, created for the new Eastern Airlines offices there. And you see here, this particular study, there are 3 of them, and this one is titled New World Unity, really talking about the connection that airlines were making between the North and Southern hemispheres. And you see the routes are delineated here from New York to Florida, and then also continuing down to Central America. And in the finished mural, this is even clearer how there's this really strong connection leading from Florida to New York, as well as the other way down to South and Central America. So also at the same time, there was a great deal of interest in heliotherapy, in the curative effects of the sun. And so in the early 30s, this sun ray sanitarium popped up. And it had this national outreach program. They created this brochure here, Miami, the year-round health spot of America. It was a facility, quite a large campus on 4 acres, just off of Flagler Street. You see here in this postcard, this was the Sunray Health Park. And these brochures were sent to hospitals and physicians all over the country to encourage people with chronic cases, everything listed from arthritis to alcoholism to nervous breakdowns, to come and spend a week or a month or a year at the Sunray Park Health Resort. And other local tourist attractions also used maps. Here we have a postcard for the Parrot Jungle, of course now Pinecrest Gardens, using the map on the backside of this card to really instruct people on how to find their way to the Parrot Jungle. And even Hollywood got involved. This is the Florida-shaped swimming pool at Cypress Gardens that was created for the MGM film starring Esther Williams, Easy to Love. And of course, another big force that brought a lot of population and interest to Miami was the effects following the Second World War. So many servicemen had trained here on Miami Beach. Many more were brought back here after the war as part of a process of assessing them after the war period. They would come here for 2 or 3 weeks to be assessed and debriefed. During that time, they were given ample time to enjoy themselves. So this is a map from this brochure that was given to these returning servicemen. And of course, as we know, many did end up moving to Miami after the war. So, in closing, humor was often used as well, or in some cases, by these agents of power. In this case, this is Bacardi. And in this postcard that was produced during Prohibition era in the United States, you see the Bacardi bat who is dropping a tipsy Uncle Sam over onto Cuba, flying from the desert. And this little, which I don't know if you can really read here, this little notice type pinned to the state of Florida says dry law. So of course everyone's coming to Cuba to enjoy themselves. And in closing, post-prohibition, so this is 1941, And this was actually produced by the 5 O'Clock Club. This postcard, you have the logo map of Florida, the spigots of Sun and Fun dispensing a brew, welcoming you to the Fountain of Youth. I love this sort of template on the back of the postcard. Dear blank, had my favorite cocktail on the house, staying for dinner, wish you were here. Thank you.